It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future.
I have a good losing story for you, though. Can I tell it to you? So,
go ahead and tell me about it, loser.
This is a good historical losing story because it puts it in perspective. So they're like my first cousins, Johann. Basically, so I'm the DeWitts. Like, DeWitt's my name, and I'm part of the DeWitt family and a couple other families because we all inbred with each other. But the DeWitt one, we're like, basically, we've advocated for this idea of true freedom since like 1200s or something, super long ago. And we're basically the non-lineage rulers for Holland for a long period of time, or for a period of time. So that's the reason why I went to school over there, master's school and stuff. But there was disagreement with one of our members of family, and William III, who was from the Royal House of Orange, the House of Orange-Nassau, which I also have family members from, but from a different part. But so he basically, at least for me, and I think they do this, I think maybe for more of the people that they think that they want to take off over the leadership position in the family, I don't know. But when I was a young kid, my grandmother told me the story about what happened to my family members at the hands of basically the Dutch devils. And it was, so we basically were part of the people that influenced and supported like the Enlightenment period.
Right.
And stuff there. And we also did questionable things too. But part of our members of our family lost badly in a war. And it was said that we had basically underprepared with the army, which was controlled, I believe, by the House of Orange. Mm-hmm. The real story that we're told is basically that William III wanted to exert his power, his lineage power over us because he felt threatened, like his masculinity felt threatened. So him and this other shady-ass dude who ended up getting arrested like 2 decades later for bilking money from the Dutch government basically made up a bunch of propaganda and got all these people riled up, and they fucking captured some of our family members and loyalty people, their kids. And so basically think about being a 10-year-old kid and your mom or your grandmother is telling you this story about how the Dutch government a couple hundred years ago basically captured kids at a similar age to you and their parents, and then raped them and tortured them and killed them. And then back then they used to strip the kids' bodies alive of their fat, and then boil the fat, and then use the fat to literally burn and torture the parents to death. So they would kill the bloodline with the lineage. And then with Johann, I think was it Johann? But they basically, so it must have been, it was Johann and Cornelius. There's still a picture of them in the Rijksmuseum to this day. They captured them. They did basically a ritual sacrifice, torture, and they gutted open their heart, or gutted open their stomach and pulled out their hearts. And in the process, they took the fat from the other family members and were burning them alive. So after they killed them, they cut up a bunch of their meat, and they went and sold it to people around the town. They said that they sold it, but actually they force-fed the meat of my family, based on this story, to the people in the town. They forced their own people to be cannibals, and under the threat of being killed. And after that experience, my family basically went underground. But there's still a painting to this day hanging in the Rijksmuseum that shows the gutted bodies of my family members hung lynched with someone about to light them on fire. And It's very offensive. And I used to go see it when I was in there. And I had to deal with, I've had to deal with, I think, so many of these situations where it's, look at the hate. Do you want to feed into that yourself? And it's like, I saw the head of the House of Orange recently, the king, supposedly apologize for their Dutch sort of thing. And I saw the picture and I instantly see he was supposed to lay a wreath in basically a memorial of all the horrible things that they've done. And he had these two women dressed up in basically indigenous costumes, and they were carrying the wreath. He didn't even have the decency to hold it and carry it himself. And Sounds you're there right. Trying to pretend like you care. And I just, from part of my family would still be in leading probably the King of England, and if they hadn't been replaced by Germans, like the current house or the current kings of England didn't have really a actual claim to the throne, a legitimate claim, until they married Princess Diana because she's a Stuart. And when they found King Edward, the claim that Queen Victoria, I believe, or whoever used to essentially claim the throne, or actually no. Basically, the reason that they say that they're legitimately allowed to be there is because they're related to this guy, John of Gaunt, who was an illegitimate son of Edward, I believe. Mm-hmm. And there was always questions about his illegitimacy, but the first two heirs died, so he took over. And they found, I think it was Edward, either Edward or Henry under a parking lot in Leicester, where my family ruled for a long time, but years ago. And when they tested the bones, they found that it didn't match the lineage. And that's why the current ruling family won't consent to DNA tests. Because it will prove that they have no bloodline lineage. So they claimed this, took it with force, and they still do shady stuff. Like the Queen basically did a tax on Canada a couple years ago so she could buy a $70 million diamond. And this is like money that should be going to those people. But even though they pretend, it's just, I wouldn't want to have anything to do living in a place that Prince Charles is ruling over now. That guy is a psycho, man. And he was auctioning off his childhood drawings lately. And I'm just like, this guy is crazy. Like, who fucking cares? So it's unfortunate sometimes that you have these wonderful institutions, mm-hmm. which literally the descent of killers that feel that they're pure and virtuous because they've killed so many people. So maybe here's a contrasting on my side too. I'm related to the worst hero ever. He's a uncle, like a great uncle, Admiral George Dewey. He's still glorified today as a hero, but he was a eugenicist and a Nazi and a traitor. Him and everybody was like, oh, he publicly went out and predicted World War I. And everybody said he was crazy, it wasn't going to happen. The things people don't know is that him and Teddy Roosevelt, who were riding buddies that used to go ride all the time and wanted to get back in the war, they caused World War I. And this is the shit that people don't talk about. So you got these heroes that literally, I don't know. George Dewey was basically the founder of
the Dewey Decimal System.
That was his brother. Oh, and okay. His aunt was Betsy Ann Dewey that married one of my grandfathers, who's like a Medal of Honor winner. but was it the Battle of Philippines? I don't remember. There was a big old naval battle in the Philippines in 1880s, and everybody thought he was crazy. He went over there with an underserved fleet, and then he went out and killed like 600 people, and it was a huge turning point in the war over there. So people started branding him at home as the Great White Hope because he was out killing people, basically dirty-faced people all over the world, and supporting Aryan Nazi genocide. So he was sponsored by a soap company that had him on the cover giving a bar of soap to a black person because they were unclean, and they could use his whiteness to help purify them. And so they literally believed in exterminating all non-white people. And he was the best friend of Theodore Roosevelt for years. And they hung out by themselves, and they planned on how he could get back into the game. I feel that guy himself has had more influence on this American military industrial complex than anybody else in the world. It was his idea. He came up with it, and he was an advocate for stuff, basically the type of things that turned into like the Tuskegee experiment. And this was a division in my family because my part of the family didn't believe in this, supposedly. Or they didn't. I'm sure they believed in a lot of it, but when it goes to exterminating people like they're insects, the type of language that they use is just horrifying. And it's if you're going to throw stuff out, then I think for me, you got to be honest about where you come from too.
If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewNextPodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.